reduce sprawling development that's more auto-dependent and will increase traffic again. It is a very serious problem. And it's really critical to note that this is the first time we've seen a comprehensive solution that will provide good results for I-66 inside the Beltway, moving 2 times as many people at a minimum 45 miles per hour and doing so reliably. We do think the triggers are a little favor the widening in that one stretch too easily. The 55 mile per hour standard that was requested by the chamber was certainly too high, and I think even the 50 mile per hour standard is too high and should be 45 miles per hour. And allowing the trigger to begin a half hour before the tolling period and half hour afterward, it guarantees failure of this multimodal approach, because that's when people will crowd into the highway. On hybrids, I'm an environmentalist, but I think ultimately we have to move more people through the corridor. We need to use these HOV and transit modes to do so. This is also a way to reduce the single occupant violations that have been a challenge for the corridor. And let's be clear, very often we get unforeseen consequences where people will live farther away from work when they now have a hybrid to commute in on express lanes because of it, undermining the very environmental goals we're trying to achieve with hybrids. As for outside the Beltway, we've always requested a transit and land use option first to be studied. We asked the previous administration, we've asked this one. That is express bus, VRE, metro in the future, transit-oriented development, rural land conservation, demand management including employee transit benefits, slugging, and fixing key bottlenecks like Route 28. We never have gotten that composite solution studied on this, or really any other roadway in Virginia under multiple administrations. It's time we start looking at those transit and land use and demand management solutions together. That you're going forward, we understand. It's positive there are dollars for transit, but we're not getting enough ridership in part because of bad land use and probably because of the tolling option. We also think it goes too far out, and the cutoff for 66 outside the Beltway should be 28, where you're also going to fix the interchange. We like the idea of public ownership, allowing more dollars for transit and other needs. Let me wrap up and partially answer this other woman's comments. You know, we could keep trying to widen, the roads will fill up again, and we're going to start destroying more and more neighborhoods to do it. We've long argued that only a network of transit-oriented communities that are walkable, that give people other options, will reduce the demand on our roadways. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I should also mention, before I bring up the next speaker, one of our members, William Fralin, who is not here, had to leave. He had an emergency in his family, and he is not here tonight. And I also should note, I know at least the County of Fairfax and others may have legislative meetings tonight, and we will continue this tomorrow morning when we're back in Alexandria for those who wanted to speak. And so we certainly know there's a lot going on this time of year, but didn't want the citizens to think that anybody from the County of Fairfax were just not here because they have a conflict. The next speaker I have is Joe Vidulich.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, my name is Joe Vidulich. I'm the Vice President of Government Relations for the Fairfax County Chamber of Commerce. Good evening. Welcome to Northern Virginia. You experienced what we experienced. The Chamber's been around for 91 years. 91 years we've been around. And for the majority of it, we've been advocating for common sense transportation solutions. 91 years. We look gosh darn good for 91 years old. At least that's what I tell myself. For the majority of that time, we've been asking for things to happen. We've asked for the perfect. For the antithesis, as Mr. Schwartz argues, he argues the antithesis for the most part of what we argue. But for far too long, politicians and policymakers have let the perfect get in the way of the good. The Fairfax Chamber of Commerce endorses the Transform I-66 inside the Beltway proposal, as well as the outside the Beltway proposal. If left to our own devices, we would have loved to see that road widened years ago. We believe that it's inevitable, we believe it's needed, but we believe that this solution, the Transform I-66 inside the Beltway, is the only workable solution that actually will get people moving again. The brake lights have been here. We've been stuck in traffic. It has affected our commerce, our way of life, and the ability for us to move around the region that's critical to the Commonwealth's success. Northern Virginia is unequivocally the economic engine of the Commonwealth. That is without question. Our engine is stalled. We have this proposal here that takes into account transit, the eventual widening of I-66 inside the Beltway, as well as many other factors. It is a clear solution that actually moves the ball forward and gets us advanced. That is why the business community supports this proposal. It's not ideal, but it is the vehicle that we have before us to keep Virginia moving. Mr. Secretary, I'd also like to take a moment and publicly thank you for your decision, your announcement today on the 3-year concession on outside the Beltway I-66. You have said for the longest of times that you would let the data and the fiduciary duty that you owe to this Commonwealth guide your decision, and we agree with your decision. There's not an easy solution when it comes to transportation management in Northern Virginia. We could take one extreme or another extreme, but it has gotten us nowhere. We need to get moving again. We need the green lights to be triggered and the red lights to stop. That's why the business community supports these proposals, and we endorse it when you take it up tomorrow morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Douglas Stewart. Good evening.
Good evening. Douglas Stewart. I'm speaking for the Virginia Sierra Club tonight. We applaud VDOT's approach to moving more people through the I-66 corridor. On Inside the Beltway, we commend the approach to managing demand and funding expanded transportation options. This approach, we believe, should be allowed more time to evaluate before widening. The evaluation metrics themselves should also be re-examined. A 50-mile-per-hour threshold is basically guaranteeing that you're going to be doing the widening. And we really need to evaluate how multimodal investments are going to work for longer. On Outside the Beltway, we support a transit-first approach that combines more efficient land use and transit-oriented development with transit on dedicated lanes. We still believe a transit-first approach would better address congestion in the corridor outside the Beltway. The current transit and bicycle plans mark a good start. But outside the Beltway, there are many areas that are becoming more compact, mixed use, and walkable that the transit plan could focus more resources on, and you get a lot of bang for the buck by getting those mixed use corridors, the residents and commuters there, into express buses and improving walking and bicycling conditions. So transit service expansions and pedestrian bicycle improvements targeting these areas, especially in the TDM plans, really should be looked at. We also believe the transit funding for I-66 outside the Beltway must be built into any procurement agreement similar to the way they are built into the draft term sheet for the design, build, finance, operate, maintain procurement arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker is Mr. David Miller. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is David Miller. My wife and I and our children live in Vienna, Virginia, and I am a process improvement engineer and program management consultant by trade with over 25 years work experience. I'm mentioning this to reinforce what is known by many, that the process for implementing transportation projects in the DC area is broken, resulting in dramatic funding shortfalls, NIMBYism, interjurisdictional bickering, and Band-Aid type transportation solutions. Band-Aid type solutions like the current Route 66 proposal, which will result in marginal improvements and expensive toll lanes while continuing to fall 50 years behind the transportation needs. To actually fix the transportation crisis and address the unacceptable gridlock in the region, along with the resulting unproductivity, pollution, safety, security, and quality of life issues caused by years of underfunding, we propose that instead, regional representatives work with Congress to create legislation to impose a 1% service charge on the 1,300 federal agencies in order to collect the tens of billions in funds required to aggressively implement the needed projects and complete them all in 10 years. The federal government has already proven this possible in the past by completing any number of mammoth projects in under 10 years, including the original DC Beltway of 64 miles, the original metro system of 98 miles of track, the Washington Aqueduct, the ring of 100 regional military Civil War forts, and 50 miles of roads. Even the District of Columbia itself was established by an act of Congress where President Washington approved the street plans and completed the massive construction project within 9 years. New projects required to fix the project are an extension of the Metro subway out to all DC spokes for 25 miles, like on Route 66, building the Metro subway along the Beltway to connect the suburbs, creating 2 outer Beltway rings and rerouting commerce around the inner core, widening all corridors and arteries and eliminating inefficient tolls, etc., etc. But to do it right, the federal legislation should also create a separate line item for the unfunded projects, a commission to lead and coordinate those projects, mandate completion in 10 years, and establish a fair but firm process to deal with regional NIMBYism and interjurisdictional bickering. Federal legislation is required at this time because the process is broken and can only be fixed by involving the federal government. Furthermore, the federal government is the region's largest direct and indirect employer, resulting in an extended community of 5 million people, and has a responsibility to ensure the government runs
Mr. Miller, I ask you to wrap up, please.
and efficiently. In summary, it's time to learn from the past, get it all done in 10 years, and be the capital city worthy of this great nation. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mr. Bailey Vanderpoe, and to move this along a little bit further, the next person will be Mr. George Pope after Mr. Vanderpoe. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bailey Vanderpool. I'm an Arlington resident and I rely on mass transit to commute on a daily basis. I really applaud VDOT's hotline proposal and believe this will help contribute to multimodal transportation efforts, which has been adversely affected in '95 after the policy changed from HOV 3 to 2. I'm concerned about the 2020 proposal to widen lanes if the traffic analysis triggers are hit. I'm concerned that's not enough time to really evaluate the multimodal methods and if this is properly alleviating congestion. Widening lanes is proven time and time again to induce demand, briefly alleviating congestion and, before resulting in more congestion. In addition, I don't see how widening the lanes will have a significant impact on alleviating any congestion if they stop at Ballston. I just believe it's going to create a bottleneck into DC. And also, as a cyclist living in Arlington, I'm also very concerned about the influx congestion into our roads. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. George Pope, and then Kathy Mallard is on after Mr. Pope.
Mr. Secretary, the members of the Northern Virginia Transportation Board, I'm a citizen. I've lived in Northern Virginia for the past 40 plus years. I can even remember the time in a toothpick alley that some of the old timers can still remember. And the inconveniences of eminent domain and construction, and even we're talking about the outer beltway with 28 and a number of things that have to be done, even with this project. There's been a lot of problems over the past 40 years of bringing the region together, council and governments and all the different governments. We even have concerns about the transparency today. And particularly many people from Prince William and Loudoun County were up in arms about that 200-mile-away meeting about a month ago. Now, we have one objective, to move people and make this place a more friendly place to live, for people to commute to and from work. For over 15 years, I traveled from roughly exit 47 to 4-mile run in 29. My wife and I drove to the region, but quite frequently we had to go separately. We know all the bailouts through Arlington and parts of Fairfax. I'm not going to continue that. You've heard all this. I think the main concern I would like to bring to the table tonight is the factor that bandwidth, yes, there are concerns. Arlington County has, over many years, kind of fought anything there. And we know that a maximum of only about 1,900 to 2,000 some odd cars per lane. And we know the disaster of widening going out from Montgomery County going north. It doesn't add that movement at a more rapid rate very easily. It gets congested very quickly. But the main thing I'm concerned about is some of the things that are going on, and most of our media in the whole region has not reached out to where most of the citizenry knows what the heck is going on. You ask people, and you bring up this whole subject even after the 4 meetings in November and going back to October, and they really don't know. Hey, they're shocked. They're going through this corridor. Second thing is the rates that have been projected are higher than many other more populous areas, and you think we're all multimillionaires. First of all, the factor 2. from I-95 coming around the belt.